Well, thank you for coming back. Familiar and the same faces, although you move forward a little bit, I think. That's the difference, see? I recognize all these things. I'm a tester. As a tester, you have eye for detail. We talked before the break about, we started with no more testers, or we talked about challenges in testing. We talked about management and their view on what is needed. And we started talking about what are core practices that you always need, which will make you good enough as a tester in most projects. And the first thing we talked about is also the thing I talk about most, that means most in length today, was risk-based testing. Have clear focus on what are the things that really matter for our customers, for the business. Define what more focus means, or more effort means. In a nice word, a differentiated risk-based test approach. Wow. And use that throughout. Even use that as a basis for building, as we said already, the one-page test plan. That's the first core practice I've talked about. And I said already, if you want to hear more, a little bit more at least, I have another talk at 4:15 on the same topic. Okay. Let's move to the second core practice that I believe always has added value, and we're not always doing it correctly. Let's put it that way. Reviews. I can talk about reviews for 2 days if you want. Okay. I only have 5 minutes, so it's not going to be a full course, but I feel very passionate about reviews. Because I have learned in some companies, what I actually was allowed to implement that it can have enormous added value, provided it's done in the right way. And again, we see a statement from Bill Hetzel. You remember the guy from 1983? I think he's still alive, by the way. The other one isn't, but this one is. He says, testing is also preventing defects. So I think if we talk about testers or testing, it's not about only by executing test cases. It's also about trying to be as early as possible and find defects early. And testing is not only done by testers, it's by the whole team. Together we should at least try to find them early as possible. That's why my second recommendation is perform reviews. However, you cannot, again, risk-based, you cannot do a proper review on any document, on every test case, on every code that you develop. So do them on those things that matter. So limited, but priority to risk again. Okay. And do them in such a way that they have added value, make them effective. So the second recommendation comes out as perform limited, effective reviews. And think about Agile again, communication, feedback, working together with the customer. So priority is risk, and the review practices, which I will elaborate on the next slide, that actually make a difference. So do it in the right way. Don't, and I've seen so many of those, don't get involved in what I call management satisfaction reviews. You probably think they're not there anymore. They are. I'm involved in an organization, and I will not mention the name because this is not a positive feedback. But you get emails with a document attached. By the way, these emails come totally unannounced, so you have no idea what's coming. They're just, here it is. It's a document of sometimes 50 pages, sometimes longer. The only comment is, please review this. So I was expecting, why me? Please review this. I have no idea why. And there's always a deadline, which is probably not later than at least 1 week, at the most. I submit my comments, I never hear back. I'm so motivated. And this is still happening today in some companies. I mean, real reviews, that's what I'm talking about, is different. And as I said already, I've been fortunate to implement reviews in many companies. And I was asked quite often by management to calculate a return on investment. I always calculate this very defensively. But I'm able to show you, if you have time, and I've got slides on that, that for every euro you put into reviews, it gives a payback of at least 2 euros. At least. Now suppose we have a machine outside. And the machine says, if you put in a 10 euro, you get back 20 euros. Suppose. No one was going to be here. You'll all be queuing up on the machine outside, right? And this is what we're actually doing. So we're not using that. And it's there. But that means, and these are, I like the word which comes from Tom Gilt, which is like the review guru, if you want, in the world. He says, it's simple, but not easy, which is a very clever statement. Because if you look at reviews, it's like, oh, everyone can do it. Sure. Everyone can send out an email to me saying, 50 pages, please review this. But doing it in the right way, making them effective, making them efficient, doing it such that you get actually the 20 euros back, that takes skills. And that means, for instance, there are different types of reviews. I can't, again, but walkthrough with customers is very different. It's for validation purposes. That's very different from doing an inspection for verification purposes. These should not be mingled. Know what you're trying to achieve in a review. And apply the technique that fits and meets that objective. Whether it's an informal review, a walkthrough, an inspection. Managing a review is not so straightforward. Managing a meeting as part of the review is not so straightforward. Doing an entry check is not so straightforward. So having what I call trained moderators or trained facilitators in an organization helps enormously. Some organizations have what I call moderator du jour, that's French, right? So everyone is a moderator all the time. This is a skill. This is a job, understanding the process. Roles. If you give me a document, tell me what you expect. Please, Eric, look at this aspect of the document. Look at it from a testing perspective. Look at it from a development perspective. Look at it security aspects. Look at it whatever you want. But make it clear why. Because if we're all just doing something, we have no idea what we're doing. Use checklists. Kick off sometimes. Kick off means you sit together in a room and someone briefly explains. It could be a 10-minute meeting only. We're doing a review here for these and these purposes. I'm not quite sure on this aspect of the document or the code. Please help me. We have learned by measuring, I don't know, thousands of reviews that doing a kickoff gives you about 10 to 15% more defects. That's added value. It's so easy. Entry check. I'm just taking out a few things. Suppose you're asked to do a review on a document, a 5-page document. And doing that, you find out they haven't even used a spell checker. Or on the first page, you found so many defects like they haven't done a good job themselves. There is something like it demotivates you. Secondly, what happens is, because you're finding so many defects, you're lost in the document. So there is something like, you've heard about it, I guess, garbage in is garbage out. The document needs to be review ready. It needs to have a certain level of quality. So doing an entry check. If you give me any test document, and you ask me to spend half an hour on a document, I will tell you whether the document is good enough for a review. I'm not saying it's perfect. I can say, it looks a stable document, let's do it. And that means if it's quality in, you get better quality out. We've also seen, and I'm using a flip open now all of a sudden. I have one here, why not? Hopefully it's visible for you all at the back. This is the number of major defects per page. Okay? This is the number of pages in a review. What does it mean? If the document is very big, a few per page. That's not a bad document, it's a very, very bad review. We've learned reviews, probably the max you can do is 20 pages. These are all kinds of rules. That's what I'm saying is, if you don't care about trained moderators, don't care about entry check, don't care about roles, don't care about kickoff, do too many pages, what are you doing? It has added value, a lot of added value, provided it's done the right way. Okay? Reviews. So the first one was risk-based testing, and the second one, consider implementing doing reviews in the right way. Limited, not on all documents, but on these things that matter. And the same thing, another one, checking rate. You cannot, if you're checking a document, go any faster than about 10 pages, which is absolutely max. So if you send me a 50-page document, you're expecting me to at least put in 5 hours. This is not reading, it's checking. It's a different activity. I can read faster, but checking is different. So risk-based testing, reviews, and my third favorite, fits very much in the Agile world, but I've been telling about this before we even talked about Agile, is unit testing. If you get developers to start doing real unit testing, it has much, much added value. However, that means, for instance, because it's so easy, developers should do unit testing. That means also, to be fair, developers should be trained in testing. Because quite often, we move from development to a test role, or they have to test all of a sudden, never trained. That's not fair. Things I like very much in unit testing, and I'm not trying to make it too difficult, is things like code coverage. If you do real unit testing, to me, that means you understand what level of code coverage you are achieving, whether it's statement coverage or decision coverage or any other coverage level. If you will say to me, we're doing unit testing, great. And then I ask the question, so what coverage level are you achieving? I've got no idea. And to me, the companies I get into, many don't know. So we're doing unit testing and I've got no idea how many lines of code we're actually covering. How can I manage that project? How can I release? I've got no idea. How can I do continuous integration? It's like, we got all these test cases. We got no idea what they're doing. We got all these test cases. They're all automated. Doesn't make sense. So the part of unit testing is to have some kind of means to also measure code coverage. The other thing which is up there is body testing. I very much like it because it says up there already, testing requires independence. The most simple measure for independence at unit level is already say, let's make buddies. So if you are a developer and your colleague or is also a developer, you're developing your own software, and when you're testing, you're mixing. That means you test the software of your colleague and vice versa. It's so simple. But at that level, you get more added value. I have a background working as a developer. And I made programs, and when they are done, I was proud. Look at it, it actually works. Wow, There's no way you can come back to the office the next day and say, let me now break my own program. You just cannot do it. Whereas together, much, much stronger. I'm not talking about, whoa, this can be done. Easy. That comes from the practice of XP. So when I talk about unit testing, I talk about very practical stuff and training people and getting them to do things. I don't talk about, to be honest, test-driven development. Maybe all of you are doing test-driven development, then I'm wrong. But what I'm seeing from clients that I'm visiting, TDD is done mostly at conferences. We talk about it all the time, but I see very, very few companies doing it. Actually, I sent out an email because I thought a long time, because you are at a conference and they talk about TDD all the time, and then I go to a company and I think, it's not doing TDD. So it must be me. I'm only visiting the bad companies. Okay? So what I did a few months ago, I sent out emails to people I respect, who also are visiting many, many companies, say, are you seeing TDD happening? Or is it just me? And they all came back saying, no, I know one company, or I know none, or whatever. I now know one who actually is doing TDD. So TDD is nice at conferences. It's a good idea, don't get me wrong, if you hear about it, but it's pretty expensive. It's actually a different way of working for developers. And the question is, remember what we were talking about earlier? It's about being good enough. So are you willing to invest so much more money during software development as TDD requires? So I wouldn't worry too much about TDD as well here. So this is, to me, is more practical, and this is the way I would propose. There is a design. Let's say there is a software design, and you being one of the developers, you develop your code based on that, okay? Your colleague, based on the same design, will develop some test code, unit level, so test code rather than test cases. We then run those, and there are two checks now all of a sudden. The first check is, does the code do what it is supposed to do? A functional check. And if it's not, let's assume, I know there's more possible, but let's assume the code is wrong, so we update our code, and we test it again, and hopefully it then passes. But there's a second diamond here. It says, when you run all your test cases, we check whether you meet the required level of coverage. If not, you might have passed everything, but if you've not tested everything, go back and make more test cases. And again, I'm not thinking you should have 100%, because that doesn't make any sense, but think about what's level, but it's part of this process. And when you've actually met both criteria, you've done it. So body testing, get developers involved in this, train them. We also think about coverage. Interesting enough, there's been a lot of research, by the way, that things like unit testing, user acceptance testing, system testing, when you only look at functional specifications and then do testing, they only achieve 30 to 40% code coverage. So if you don't really focus on getting good code coverage during unit testing, some features which are in your software, some lines of code which are in your software, you know who's going to test them the first time? Your customers. That's not what you want, right? And unit testing and getting them automated has everything to do, of course, also with continuous integration. This is a slide of one of my clients. I removed the data on the client specifically, but what you see here is that I do continuous integration, I do automated testing, unit test cases are automated, and every day they measure the code coverage being achieved. And all of a sudden, the code coverage drops below a certain threshold, then we have an action to update the code coverage and get on a certain level again. And this is a way to manage. Now we know what we're doing. This should be part of continuous integration. It's not about running test cases and not know what you're doing. It's about running test cases and know what you're doing. And these things really pay off. They really work. So my recommendations is risk-based testing. Think about reviews, how to make them effective and use them where necessary. And try to get unit testing, get developers involved, train them, code coverage, body testing is a third one. But don't, that's another one which comes with it, don't make this too difficult. Number 4, use test techniques as tools. What I mean by that is we teach test design techniques quite often, decision tables, pairwise testing, equivalence partitioning, classification trees, whatever ones you use, boundary value analysis. But sometimes people start using them by the book, if you want. And it's like, whoa, they get all this beautiful, and then a manager asks them, so how's testing going? Wow, it's going very well. Look at these beautiful decision tables. That's not the goal. The goal is to find defects, right? Test design techniques have been made to help you to find more defects. Use them in the right way. Use them as a tool for such, and don't make them your objective. I personally very much like to use test design techniques that relate strongly to how a user thinks or make it visualized. If that becomes too difficult, it's very difficult to communicate with them. That's why I like classification trees, for instance, because they give a picture. And a picture is often, as said, more than 1,000 words. But it's, okay, now I understand what you're doing. I also very much like that we do what I call a test design. I'll come back to it on the next slide. And by test design, I mean is don't lose yourself in test cases which are all detailed, but think about, so what are the things we need to test here? What are the test conditions I need? And the nice thing about test designs is they usually fit on one page. And you know what the good thing about one page is? One page is easy to review. You can give one page of test design with high level, these are my things, is this good? And the same thing with a test design startup meeting. I'll explain in a minute. And I also like exploratory testing, by the way. Provided it is not done as error guessing. If we look at a test design, what I mean by test design is that you go through documentation with your marker, if you want, to say, oh, this is interesting to test, this is nice to test, this is nice to test, and you get some test ideas and build lists. And the same thing is here. You see an example of I don't know if you understand this, but it's a down converter actually, but who cares? Say, hey, these are terms I can play around with as a tester. You know, you can vary them, and there are valid values and invalid values. These are the things I need to test. That's not test cases yet, but that's a list of test ideas. And of course, within a certain domain, you can go to a user, to a customer, to a developer and say, these are the things I want to test. Can you add something? Is this a good list? And sometimes you don't even develop the test cases. And sometimes you do, for whatever reason. Yeah? And the same thing with classification trees, because it gives a picture. Say, hey, we're actually testing this. Is it what you need? So I very much like that people, instead of going down and saying, oh, we got all these test cases, brilliant. First take a step back and say, okay, I need to do this user story, a set of user stories or system. What are the things I would like to test? And do a test design. And use techniques to help you to build test conditions. And the same thing is, if you're doing this, maybe think about, we can talk about it a long time, by the way, to make sure you have some kind of traceability back to your requirements, back to user stories. Because user stories, requirements tend to change. And if they change, you need to know what will need to be changed in your test cases, in your test conditions. This is also one of my favorites. everywhere I go, every time I'm a test manager or I'm a test consultant, I try to set up what I call test design startup meetings. It's very simple and it's so effective. Instead of, you're a developer, so I'll not talk to you, but I'll talk to, over here you have testers. What you don't want is a tester to say, oh, I need to test this. So thank you very much. I'll take the documentation, I go behind my desk and I'll make test cases without talking to anyone. I'd rather say, before I start making test cases or doing test design, let's have a quick 15-minute, 30-minute sit together with the person who wrote the requirements, who knows about the background, with a developer who has developed the feature, who is probably not quite sure about some things. Maybe there's another tester who is also testing a part of the system that you work together with. Sit together for half an hour and brainstorm. And say, so what are the things we could test here? What are the things which matter to you as a business manager or user? What are the things you worry about as a developer? This is not about saying you did a wrong job, but work together. And based on that, you make a sort of mind map. And you get great ideas. Thank you very much for your input. And now I can start making test cases. But these will be much stronger because as a tester, you don't know everything. You think you do, but you don't. There are people with more domain knowledge. There are people with more technical knowledge. Use that. So I very much like to implement always test design startup meetings. And think back. Earlier we started about risk-based testing, remember? And we had 4 squares for those who were before the break. Well, test design startup meetings takes time. It's only half an hour, yet with 4 people, that's 2 hours. So do it where it matters most. Do it at least for those items which are risky, with much business value. And for items which are less important, maybe skip it. I mean, it's a good idea. Everything is good, but you can't afford to do them all the time. Exploratory testing. First of all, exploratory testing. 10 minutes? No, it's not possible. Really? Really? Well, 10 minutes, I guess. You're the boss. Exploratory testing. It's different, first of all, than error guessing. That's important. People in the past did error guessing. They heard about exploratory testing, do the same thing, but it's a nicer term. So now we have moved on. Exploratory is very powerful. Testing is about finding defects, as I said already, not about producing documents. This is a very focused process. But it only works if it's done in the right way. And the right way, I'll give you some examples. If we start by having a test chart, and a test chart is like a test design with test ideas. It may be the result from a test design startup. So they're asked, hey, here are some ideas. And typically it's done in sessions, uninterrupted, with 2 persons. So that one actually is behind the wheel, I would say, behind the screen, and the other one is observing and making notes. Typically there is debriefing. We have feedback sessions. So we learn as teams on exploratory testing what we're doing all the time. We can talk about this for a long time, but there is more to this than error guessing. If you do exploratory testing, which is very powerful, again, do it in the right way. Understand what exploratory testing means. And one of the things I like to point out if you do this, keep track of what I call the bug fix ratio. Often as a tester, you like finding defects. You know, it's like, yeah, I've got a defect. And if you do exploratory testing, yeah, I got all these defects. Oh, yes, 30 defects found. Whoa, best thing done ever. Okay, the question now comes, how many of these 30 defects will actually be solved by development. If they say, this one doesn't matter, it's minor, not important, these 10 we will solve. Then these 10 have actually value. And typically, in traditional testing, we write test cases, we ask developers to review them, so when we find a defects, they are actually defects. But now we are doing something which is exploratory, so make sure you're actually finding defects that matter. So keep track of how many are finding versus how many are solved. And learn what is development, what are users, what are customers, what are managers looking for. Okay? The bug fix ratio. The last one. My last one is probably maybe even the most important one. People. Myers, remember, 1976? Testing is an extremely complex, intellectually challenging task. You can invest in risk-based testing, in reviews, but also invest in building great people. It's very, very, very important. And important to say, I said it already at unit testing, this is not only for testers. It's not like testing today, exclusive territory for testers. No. Business analysts tests, developers tests, users tests, architects tests, they all need to understand. If you get good testers trained on a job, and by trained on a job, by good testers, I will explain briefly what I mean by that. Today's testers don't only know about testing. A today tester, we call it a T-shaped tester. Have you heard about the term? Yes, you know about testing. You know about test management, risk-based testing, test techniques, all these things traditional. But also you know about development. You know about scripting, about requirements engineering, configuration management. You know about domain. You have domain knowledge. An example I was working for Philips Healthcare for a while. And at Philips Healthcare, they sent every tester to hospital twice a year. Not because they're very ill testers, but to observe how the machines are actually being used in real life. And you learn so much from that you can build better test cases. This is very important. And of course, you have soft skills. You are able to communicate. You are eye for detail. You can present. Having these people involved makes a difference. Yeah? That's what we're talking about. So people skills. And there are more things I can talk about on people skills, like adequate rewards. I like that one. If you have done something in a company, typically what happens is the manager comes and says, it's a bottle of wine. Maybe you don't even drink wine. Think about who that person is and give him something that he or she actually appreciates. Show him you care. Have what I call test meetings. I have many companies where they have on a monthly basis, they have a technical meeting where someone says, actually I went to Erik van Veenendaal at SQA Days and I learned about test risk sessions and we tried them in our project. And I'll explain what we did. So we talk about the content all the time. We learn. I know of some Scrum teams where they have Scrum, multiple Scrum teams, and there's a weekly test stand-up to show them what we're doing in testing. A best practice library. I don't care about templates. I think you got the idea already. What I care is about good examples. And I don't care about the word best, because some people say, it's not the best. I don't care. It's the best we've got, so it's our best practice. If there's a good test design being made by someone, let me see it. I can learn from that. And the last one, well, there are more, but this one, I think is also important. Team dynamics. We're almost done, by the way. See you. We build teams today in Agile based on technical skills. I need a tester. I need 2 developers. That's how we build teams. What we should do, also think about personalities. I don't know if you've heard about Belbin, who says people have certain types. Some people are finisher, they want to get the job done. Some people are more like, ooh, what's going on? They're more thinkers, monitoring evaluators. And actually, if you build a team based on what people are like, the team could be much more effective and efficient than just picking people by technical skills. What kind of people do you need in a team? Who are the people who are already in a team? Team dynamics. Yeah, one thing, I have to do this one. There's a little chicken in there. You can see that? With a what they call that, egg on his head. It's called Calimero. Have you got Calimero here in Letland or in Russia? No. It's a cartoon, and this chicken is always crying. I can't do this. I can't do. And this, and many people, I've heard, many managers see testers as Calimeros. Because what testers do is, I can't do this because there's no test environment. And there are no requirements. I can't do this. I mean, and if that's the way you act in your company, do you expect to be treated seriously? So think about how you act and how you actually are going about in your company. Don't be a Calimero. Hopefully you get the picture I'm trying to. I think look at it on YouTube. I think there are English versions as well, but you'll get the idea if you say, "Oh, this is not me," or "This is me." I don't know. So we talked about, in summary, these are things I would think, if you take them home, think about it, which one you can use. They have worked for me over the years. Clear testing priorities, effective reviews, get developers doing unit testing, test technique, great, but as tools in the right way, and build experienced and skilled testers. And my final comment, before you can ask questions, if there are any questions, is no more testers. My statement would be quite opposite. I think today's world, with all the challenges we got, time to market, which is critical, software being everywhere, there has never been a time when software testers were needed more. Thank you very much.
We are out of time, but if Erik is ready to answer some questions, we can.
Thank you for report. You spoke of formula for risk, and could you explain of impact in detail, how we should choose the measure of measurement of it?
Okay. The question is, how can we measure impact and how can you make that valuable? Yeah. Okay, good question. I would say come to my workshop at 4 o'clock. But I don't think you can ask people. Sorry, I'll wait for your. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't think you can ask the question, what's the impact for a certain user story or requirement, or what's the likelihood, if that for that matter, on a scale from 1 to 10. Doesn't make any sense. What you want to ask is talk about factors in your company that actually determine the impact. And I'll give you examples of factors. For instance, in some areas, is this feature safety related, yes or no? Because safety in healthcare, then it's important all of a sudden. In some areas, it's about, is this feature external visible? Because as long as the defect is internal in the company, we're okay. If we hit the Riga papers, it's going to be different. Okay? So is this feature used a lot? If it's used a lot by all users, huge impact. So instead of talking about impact, try to find factors in your organization that determine the impact and measure those. Does that answer your question? Somehow, yeah, not fully, but yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do you have a situation or project when you have not a document for reviews? No. For when you have a document and then testing don't use the document.
Testers don't use the document, sorry. Sorry.
Ну, я хочу спросить, может кто-нибудь поможет перевести?
Yes. I have no idea. Yeah.
Вопрос такой, что были ли ситуации, когда нету документа для ревью вот этого, то есть проект без вообще вот какой-то такой документации?
Now I get it. Okay.
Вы рассказывали про ревью. У меня в проектах очень часто бывает такое, что документов основных нету вообще. Вот. И в связи с этим вопрос, как вы, были ли у вас такие ситуации, как вы с ними справлялись?
Okay. I got it. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I got the question. I think the question was, and I'll repeat that if wrong, is in my projects, we don't have any or of only few documents, right? By documents, I also mean software code. I do hope you have software code. No, it's software. I'm serious. Software code is also a document. You have test cases, I guess, and test cases also documents. By the way, this is a sidestep to that. If there is no documentation, I do worry a little bit about maintenance in the future. If you understand what I'm saying here. Because I think in Agile, what we're trying to do is document as little as possible. But what I also see is sometimes the systems, this system will only last 2 years. But in the end, the system will last for 10 years. And there's no documentation at all except for the software code. Well, good luck. Okay? So, but your question is there no documentation? Yes, there always is, because there is software code which you can review. There is test cases you can review. There is user documentation you can review. So there always is documentation. But don't think about documentation only in terms of a Word document. Okay? Yeah? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it works. So I really liked you. Thank you for a talk, first of all, and I really liked your idea about test design startups meetings. So I think you have nothing against to make it regular, for example, in the projects, right? So it could be. Because the systems change and the test design changes, so it may be not only at the first stages of the project. From the second point, as the result of the exploratory testing, so you may have the outputs of your exploratory testing as the inputs of those designs. But, so here comes my question.
There's a question as well. Okay.
Yeah. So any changes to test design and to structure of test cases result in the test scope changes, which change schedules, amount of work to be done by testers. So what are maybe your proposals or ideas on how to explain that scope change and things that we want to get rid of this part of the tests from our test base, and we want to introduce new tests. And usually, especially business users, want to have more and more tests in the scope, but with the same amount of time planned. So what maybe are some tricks just in addition to usual prioritizing? So what are your thoughts on that?
Thank you. I think there was a question somewhere along the line. But what you said is if we change our test designs, for whatever reason, if we change our test scope, typically it influences our test schedule and effort needed and how can we go about for doing that. And typically, I think what you're saying is business wants to test everything. Difficult question. Not so easy to answer. What I like to do is to make estimations on a detailed level. I don't know if you heard about Wideband Delphi, for instance, estimation processes. So you clearly show how much effort will be taken by doing this kind of action. First of all, they disagree because they think, oh, it can be done quicker. We do this, and in the next project, the next phase, next sprint, we keep track of the effort for that one. So we have more value. So we are backed up with that. And next time we have a discussion, say, hey, this is how long it took last time. So we have real value. And then in the end, it is about setting priorities. You can't do everything. So you got to say, hey, look, we've discussed that. It takes 8 hours extra. Hey, I don't mind doing 8 hours extra. I don't mind speaking 3 more weeks. But also you say it has to be done last week. So tell me what to do. So it's detailed estimations and building up, that's the second thing, building up actual, I would say, real-life data as quickly as possible. So you can have a good discussion. I think people are coming in already from the next session. So I think we should stop. However, I will be here all the time. I'm happy to go outside, and if you have any specific questions, come back to me and I will try to answer those. Thank you very much once again. I was asked, by the way, to give out a sweater prize for the best question, and I must say you tried hardest, so that's your prize. Thank you very much. And of course, when going out, there are smileys or not.